Well, welcome everybody. Welcome to our participants. I've got a gavel in front of me here, but this is not a hearing. This is actually a roundtable discussion, which I was determined when I was asked to be chair of this committee to spend a lot of time on, because it allows us to have a really good and informal back and forth dialogue without the usual 5-minute restrictions and all the performances and everything. So I really want to thank you all for participating. And before I sort of turn it over to my friend, the ranking member, I'm really excited about this conversation because, of course, we're policy people, so almost everything we do is what policy, what laws can we pass, what can we do, what regulatory changes will actually help in our mission to address some economic disparity. And maybe, particularly on my side of the aisle, we're not quite as conscious of the work that the private sector can do to address the problems of disparity. And I asked the staff to sort of do a quick survey of, what some companies out there are doing. It's pretty remarkable. I mean, Chipotle, household name, guaranteeing a $15 minimum wage across the country. We haven't been able to pull that off here in the Congress. Campbell Soup, which is actually in my district, which provides 100% health care coverage for their employees. They've got after-school programs for kids up to the age of 12. One of my favorite organizations, the Grayson Bakery in the New York area, of course, really sort of models what enlightened and progressive stewardship can be. So I get super interested, and let me be clear on what I am really interested in hearing about. I get really interested in scalable proposals, examples of what the private sector is doing that is really addressing the challenges, in particular, of their lowest paid employees, which is the appropriate focus of this committee. Not, frankly, that interested in typical philanthropy. I know every corporation and business out there sponsors little league teams and gives money to this and that. That's great. That's wonderful stuff. But what really moves the needle? What can demonstrate that doing good also means doing well? That doing right by employees, maybe helping them a little bit more than might be intuitive with a step up, is actually really good business. So I'm hoping that this conversation really highlights those models, because we're in the process of writing our report right now. And of course, we're going to make a bunch of policy recommendations and this and that. But we'd really like to uplift some models that are actually working to address disparity, that are led and implemented by the private sector. So the way we're going to do this, Brian will make a quick opening statement. I think hopefully we've guided you guys to give us, kind of 2-3-ish minutes of introductory statements, and then really we want to sponsor a back and forth. We want to support a back and forth. And by the way, members will come in and out. It's a very busy day, so folks will come in and out, and I'll recognize them if I have questions. But the whole point of this is to get a good dialogue going back and forth. With that, Brian, anything?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate you holding today's hearing. I think it's really important that we think about the impact that private sector businesses can have, in particular on assisting people who are struggling to get by. And I was diving into the data in preparation for today's meeting, and the numbers, I think, are actually really striking and important. 122 million Americans are employed in the private sector, which means 122 million families are impacted by the wages that private sector companies provide in the United States of America. And I think that sometimes is overlooked. There's another 22 million that are working in the government sector, another about 500,000 or so in the farm sector. But it's really the private sector businesses in America that provide jobs for people. And when we think about what that means economically, it's $173 billion of private sector wages in benefits that are produced every month in the United States of America. So small adjustments in pay have a big impact on not only the economy, but on people's ability to support the things that their family needs. And right now, I think the number one issue impacting families is the cost of living. And we see the federal government this year, the fiscal year in Congress will end here in a few days. And we can estimate that total spending over the course of the last 12 months in the United States of America by your federal government is $5.8 trillion. If we think about that in terms of the value of the wages and benefits provided by the private sector, that's 8 months of private sector wages and benefits will be spent by the federal government over the past 12 months. And what we've seen over the past 2 years is excessive new federal government spending. We saw the American Rescue Plan was $1.9 trillion. It's almost 2.5 months of every American private sector wage and benefit spent, allocated over the last 2 years. The infrastructure plan was $1.2 trillion. That's about 1.5 months of every single American's private sector wage and benefit. The Inflation Reduction Act, $740 billion. That's almost equal to the entire wage and benefit for 1 month of every American working in the private sector in the United States of America. And then this administration came forward with a student loan bailout that really just shifts the burden to all taxpayers. But the cost of that, estimated somewhere between 300, 700 billion, we'll call it 500 billion for sake of discussion. Again, approaching a month's worth of entire payroll and benefits from the private sector. And so when we think that just authorized under the Biden administration is another 6 months of total private sector wages in salaries, knowing that this year, which again will end in a month, this year the federal government is about to spend 8 months worth of the entire value of private sector wages and benefits, I think it's all the more important that we talk about what policies need to be in place to grow private sector wages and benefits, because we're spending them fast here in Washington. People are struggling to keep up with rising costs. And I think there's a real opportunity to dive in and find where are the policies that we can be doing here in Washington to help workers receive a higher wage, a better wage. And it's the private sector businesses in the United States of America that employ over 122 million Americans that are really going to give us that opportunity to make sure that all Americans can afford the things that their family needs. And so I appreciate you holding today's hearing, Mr. Chairman, and I'll yield back.
Okay. With admiration of my friend Mr. Stiles' message discipline, I'm going to ask that we sort of get into the conversation of what the private sector is doing that we can highlight. And so, again, please don't go much beyond a couple of minutes, because what we really want to do is have a dialogue. But why don't we just start with Portia and go around again, a couple of minutes of introduction and things that you really want us to take away from the conversation.
All right. Thanks so much. I'm Portia Wu with Microsoft. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member, for having me here today. Just want to spend a couple of minutes on some ways that our company works to address inequity and provide more opportunity. That's through our workforce and our suppliers, providing support to connectivity and expanding digital skills across the United States, and paths to good technology jobs. So Microsoft is proud to support over 100,000 employees in the United States. We're in all 50 states. And we also work with our suppliers and partners to create opportunity beyond our own walls. So for example, our major suppliers must provide their employees with paid sick days to care for themselves or a sick family member, and 12 weeks of paid parental leave. And when our main campus suspended services like cafeteria, transportation during COVID, we worked with those suppliers to ensure they could continue to pay their hourly workers, and they did so through much of the pandemic. Because we recognize that's where the impacts were really coming, was on those hourly workers. I do want to say we recognize that we're fortunate to be able to support workers in this way, and that's not something that every company can do. It is not a one-size-fits-all approach. Another critical area for partnership, I think, with government, because there are a lot of companies that can't do this on their own, is really thinking about digital skills. And I think this is important because 3/4 of jobs today require some level of skills, but by some accounts, about 1/3 of American workers have low or no digital skills. So in order to address those gaps, it's important that we think about, starting from the K through 12 pipeline, and there we support programs like we have volunteers through the Technology, Education, and Literacy in Schools program, volunteers to go out and teach computer science in underserved schools, teaching the teacher at the high school. Over 50% of those schools are Title I schools, so it's really reaching kids at the beginning of the pipeline. That needs to continue with pathways into the technology sector. And so that can mean apprenticeship. It can mean programs for transitioning military veterans and their spouses, and for sure, investments in community college programs. And I'd say that's an area we're really focusing on now. And finally, I think it's really about, for us, reaching communities that have traditionally been underrepresented in technology. That could be because they're geographically more remote or less populated. It could be underserved communities, minority communities. And we do this in a variety of ways. I'm happy to talk more about that, but I think that's really where we need to think about what are other pathways where we as corporate citizens can engage with communities, but that's also a place where government and policy can help to support. So happy to answer further questions about that, and thank you again for the opportunity to participate.
Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Goodell? You probably need to move that a little closer too if it's going to come across on the system.
All right, I think maybe that works.
Is that good enough? Okay.
Thank you, Chairman Himes and Ranking Member Stile, and members of the committee. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today and take part in this roundtable discussion. My name is Svenny Godal, and I'm the Chief Economist of Indeed, the leading job search website. Our team of international economists and researchers produce research on the global labor market, any sort of trends we find interesting that are currently happening, using Indeed's proprietary data as well as any publicly available data to us. Since its founding in 2004, Indeed has put the job seeker experience at the heart of every decision we make. With over 63 million unique visitors per month in the US and 250 million globally, job seekers are able to search millions of jobs in more than 60 countries in 28 languages. As our company has grown, this mission has never changed. Indeed helps everyone get jobs, including those facing barriers. Our work to help address barriers to employment comes through our own programming efforts, like our Essentials to Work programs, which partners with key organizations to provide computers, hotspots, transportation, and criminal record clearing services to individuals in need. Our work to help improve equity and inclusive hiring practices through career guides, assessments, and improved platform tools, and through our research and labor market insights. For the job seeker, barriers come in many forms and in different stages of their application to hiring process, before and during all that. Since the pandemic, we've been operating in an extremely tight labor market, where at times there have been roughly 2 job openings for every unemployed job seeker out there. This has led to employers going to great lengths to attract talent and diverse talent at that. I would like to highlight a few employment trends that we have observed in our own research. First, I'd like to take a look at pay and wage transparency. In the US, women still earn 30% less than men, and that gap widens with age and for women of color. Businesses are increasingly looking at pay transparency as part of a strategy for diversity, inclusion, and belonging, ensuring happier employees and seeking to innovate and grow their business. Indeed data shows that over 92% of hiring decision makers and HR leaders whose companies implemented transparency measures said that they were glad to have done so. Over 57% said that since implementing salary transparency, they adjusted salaries or wages to be more equitable. And 75% of job seekers said they were more likely to actually apply for a job if a salary range was listed in that job posting. In terms of women and the pandemic's initial labor market damage was vast, and women unfortunately bore the brunt of it. Since then, the recovery has been robust, but often very uneven among gender lines. In February of 2022, 38% of jobless women of prime working age were actively searching for work, compared to 43% of their male counterparts. Unemployed men and women offer different reasons for why they lack a job search urgency, so why they're not looking with distinct urgency when it comes to looking for a job, with women often citing childcare needs more than twice as often as men do. And lastly, we took a close look at fair chance hiring. One often overlooked pool of job seekers consists of those with arrest or conviction records, justice-impacted individuals. 1 in 3 U.S. adults have a criminal record, and the stigma of these records can hinder the job search or advancement process. Fortunately, we're seeing some positive trends in the labor market consideration for justice-impacted job seekers. Job postings on Indeed noting fair chance employment policies have climbed 31% since May of 2019. The share of job searches using phrases like felon-friendly or no background check has risen 45% since May of 2021. In May of 2022, this year, 2.5% of U.S. job postings on Indeed advertised fair chance hiring, which is up from 1.9% in May of 2019. These are all positive developments. I look forward to answering any questions that you might have today and sharing more research and insights into the labor market. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Representative Barstow.
Thank you. Chairman Himes, Ranking Member Stile, and members of the Select Committee, thank you for inviting me here today. My name is Holly Ensign Barstow, and I am the Senior Director of Policy and Programs at B Lab US in Canada. I am honored that you have asked B-Lab to participate in this roundtable. We were founded in 2006 as a nonprofit. Our mission is to transform the global economy to benefit all people, communities, and the planet. Our global network creates standards, policies, and tools for business and is best known for creating the B Corp certification as well as the benefit corporation legal status. If you have ever seen this symbol on a label, website, or business front, that means it is a company that has obtained B Corp certification conferred by B-Lab. Today, there are over 5,700 certified B corporations in 85 different countries and 150 different industries, including more than 2,000 in the United States and Canada, representing over 100,000 full-time employees. B Corps are companies in every industry, from small sole proprietorships to large publicly traded companies. Becoming a B Corp is a voluntary decision that a company makes. Certification requires companies to demonstrate high social and environmental performance, but also to integrate consideration for stakeholders into their legal DNA. For many, this requires them to adopt benefit corporation status, which enables companies to expand their fiduciary duties to include stakeholders as well as shareholders. Through our efforts, over 40 states, including Delaware, have passed legislation almost always on a bipartisan basis, allowing companies to incorporate as benefit corporations. Today, there are well over 15,000 benefit corporations globally. B-Lab has also developed a free online tool called the B Impact Assessment that helps companies measure, manage, and improve impact on their stakeholders, including workers, customers, communities, and the environment. Today, our B Impact Assessment is used by more than 150,000 businesses. We are proud of where we are, and even prouder still of the growth we are seeing. From 2020 to 2021, so during the pandemic, B-Lab received more than 6,000 applications for certification from businesses in 80 countries, a 38% increase compared to just 2 years prior, as well as over 50,000 registrations on the B Impact Assessment. Today, there are 30 publicly traded certified B corporations from a wide range of industries, up from 9 in 2019, including companies like Warby Parker, Grove Collaborative, Allbirds, and Lemonade. Companies become B Corps because it allows them to be purpose-driven and at the same time create and run very successful businesses. I'd like to highlight 2 examples of this. Patagonia has been in the news recently for its founders' generosity and commitment to fighting climate change, but they are also an incredibly successful company with over $1 billion in annual sales. Patagonia provides comprehensive health insurance to even part-time employees, flexible working schedules, paternity leave, on-site childcare for both its corporate headquarters as well as its distribution center, and more. These practices have led to a 4% staff turnover rate, which is significantly less than the retail and consumer product sector average of 13%. Lemonade Insurance, a publicly traded company on the New York Stock Exchange, points to their commitment to purpose as being an integral reason why their employees feel engaged at work. 92% of employees say that Lemonade's Give Back program, where unclaimed premiums are donated to charity, impacts their happiness. We are incredibly proud of this progress and look forward to working with the committee to create a more inclusive, sustainable, and ultimately more prosperous American society. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak today. I look forward to questions.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chairman Himes, Ranking Member Stile, members of the House Select Committee. Thank you for having me here this afternoon and the opportunity to participate in this roundtable discussion. Business Roundtable is an association of 230 chief executive officers of America's leading companies working to promote a thriving U.S. economy and to expand opportunity for all Americans. BRT CEO member companies employ more than 20 million people and recognize that to build value over the long term, companies need to invest in all of their stakeholders, including their employees. In my role at the Business Roundtable, I lead the corporate initiatives, our effort to bring together our membership to make collective progress and apply best practices in worker training, diversity, and second chance employment, some of the same issues you've heard from some of the previous speakers. The initiatives also provide opportunities for CEOs to work together to build a skilled American workforce that advances broader economic opportunity. Our CEOs understand that a world-class workforce is vital to maintaining America's global competitive leadership and will generate and sustain growth and prosperity in the country. They also understand the importance of focusing on workforce issues to fill the millions of open jobs and address their emerging workforce needs, creating greater economic opportunity for workers while ensuring U.S. global competitiveness in the 21st century. Business Roundtable member companies have a track record of developing programs, partnerships, and tools to address the challenges they face in training a skilled workforce. Let me just spend a couple of minutes pointing to some of those examples. And Congressman Style, the first one comes from your state. It's the Workforce Partnership Initiative, which we're working closely with Blake Moret and Rockwell Automation and the Connected Leaders Institute and the partnership with the University of Milwaukee to create a pipeline of individuals who can take advantage of the jobs that Rockwell Automation is looking for in the skilled workforce that they have. These 9 regions that we work in are opportunities where companies are working in partnership with local community colleges, four-year colleges and universities to identify what are the in-demand jobs, but what are also the in-demand skills that will provide a path of economic mobility for all individuals. In Chicago, we have companies leading an effort with other BRT member companies to develop an apprenticeship program, which model the Learn and Earn programs that many of you are probably familiar with. The goal of the Chicago Apprenticeship Network is to scale apprenticeships in the city. Through this work, CEOs have replicated the work nationwide. We are a part of that work that you'll hear me talk about in a couple of minutes, known as the Apprenticeship Accelerator. This work, over 75 companies in Chicago have created over 1,400 apprentices, registered apprentices, with an over 90% conversion rate to full-time hires. That is the goal. We just don't want apprentices. We want those individuals to end up with a full-time job and an opportunity for economic mobility. In 2020, in the aftermath of the murder of George Floyd, Business Roundtable established additional workforce initiatives that seek to address disparities in access to employment. One of our most significant initiatives is the Multiple Pathways Initiative, where over 80 BRT member companies are participating to implement new practices to evaluate an individual's qualifications based on their skills, not just degrees. Not all jobs require a 4-year degree. Under this initiative, member companies are focused on recruitment, retention, and reskilling practices that create opportunities for individuals to work and advance, to the point that Portia made on the number of individuals and the reskilling of individuals and the digital skills that are critically important in this economy. We're equally focused on how do we take those individuals that have worked for companies for a long period of time and increase those digital skills that will allow them to not just keep their job, but grow in their job. Lastly, Business Roundtable is a founding member of the Second Chance Business Coalition. The coalition is a cross-sector of over 40 larger private sector firms that promote the benefits of second chance employment and provides employers with resources to hire and provide career advancement to individuals with criminal records. I think a really good example here is the work that JP Morgan Chase has been doing, where 10% of the hires over the past 3 years have been individuals with criminal records. Those aren't just entry-level positions. There's a plan for those individuals. And how do we help them grow in those jobs and ultimately get better jobs and better pay, and at the same time, the good benefits that many of our companies pay. Business Roundtable's newest corporate initiative, which I referenced earlier, builds on the work in Chicago, the Apprenticeship Accelerator. We're looking for all the pathways we want to provide a number of pathways for individuals to find themselves in a job that many of our companies are looking to fill. The accelerator was launched a couple of months ago in Chicago, and it's designed to help companies develop or scale their registered apprenticeship programs to expand opportunities to workers without a 4-year degree and support their development and advancement. We're committed to building on those partnerships to address our ongoing workforce needs and look forward to working with members on both sides of the aisle to find common sense solutions to promote our shared economic prosperity. Thank you for the opportunity to highlight our work of the Business Roundtable, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Lynn. Ms. Parker.
Thank you, Chairman Himes. Ranking Member Brian Stile, and the members of the committee for the opportunity to testify in this roundtable on private sector strategies that benefit workers and bottom lines. My name is Elaine Parker, and I'm the president of the Job Creators Network Foundation, one of the nation's largest small business advocacy organizations, and representing the nation's more than 30 million small business owners. Small businesses nationwide, including many JCN members, are voluntarily boosting their pay and benefits for their workers. Many others have implemented employee training programs that help their employees quickly move up the pay scale. Still others are allowing flexible schedules and other employee perks. These small business actions are not performed out of altruism. They are rational actions taken by small businesses to help their workers who help their companies' bottom lines. With the ongoing chronic labor shortage, small businesses must constantly improve their wages and working conditions or risk losing their employees to competitors. The data suggests businesses writ large boost employee pay and benefits absent of government mandates. Data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics shows that only 94,000 workers aged 25 or older, that's just 0.16% of the hourly workforce, earn the federal minimum wage. The BLS also finds that more than 90% of full-time employees nationwide have paid time off. The free market and vibrant economy are the best ways to help workers. In contrast, big government can hurt ordinary workers by reducing the economic opportunities on which they depend. Costly labor, healthcare, and environmental regulations are paid for partly from worker compensation. Reckless government spending has fueled the inflationary fire that has resulted in 17 straight months of declining real wages. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act implemented numerous small business tax cuts that allowed entrepreneurs to hire, expand, and raise wages. But unless Congress acts, these tax cuts will expire and small businesses will pay higher tax costs, partly from funds that would otherwise have gone to workers' wages and benefits. Unlike the other representatives on this panel, I represent small businesses. Small businesses lack the profit margins, economies of scale, and preferential purchasing agreements of their big business competitors, so they are disproportionately impacted by expensive big government actions. Today, the Job Creators Network is announcing its American Small Business Prosperity Plan to help bring small businesses back and the economy back to their pre-pandemic peaks. It calls for making the tax cuts permanent, exempting small businesses from new regulations, and ending reckless government spending, among other common sense, nonpartisan provisions to boost economic vibrancy. By passing the free market reforms, the JCN's Prosperity Plan, Congress can help reinvigorate small business economy and turbocharge private sector strategies to benefit workers. I'd like to highlight just one of our small business members of small businesses that had reinvested their tax savings from the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. Guy Berkebile of Guy Chemical, he's the founder and president of Guy Chemical in Somerset, Pennsylvania. That is right near the crash site of one of the 9/11 planes in a rural area of Pennsylvania. He used his tax savings from the tax cuts to purchase new equipment, build a new lab 5 times larger than his old one, raise wages for all of his employees, and hire new people from the community. He added 29 new jobs as a direct result of the tax cut savings. Due to the tax cuts induced increase in economic activity, Guy's chemical sales increased by approximately $9 million annually. He also, for the first time, was able to offer a 401k for his employees, something very important in rural communities like that to keep the youth there and provide an economic stability and future. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to answering any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Parker. So they've called votes on us, and I think we probably have, the members here have probably, I don't know, 10 minutes or so before we're going to need to disappear for about a 20-minute period because there's 4 votes. But so Brian and I got a little bit of airtime. So Mr. Gonzalez, Mr. Donalds, again, this is designed to be a dialogue, not just designed to be a dialogue. So I'll go to you guys, Mr. Gonzalez. I'll start with you, Mr. Byron. Go to you, or Byron. Go to you next. If you've got questions.
Our nation is witnessing a shift to battery-powered vehicles, which requires a different set of skills that many of those in the auto manufacturing industry currently have. As Indeed tracks the investments corporations are making in the workforce, have you observed any pitfalls or things that we could be doing better, especially in communities like mine, one of the poorest regions in the state of Texas and on the border? What could we do more to engage the industry and obviously our schools and community colleges to bridge that gap and grow in that
Yeah.
sector?
I mean, I'd answer that question in two parts. One, I think you can do early on training, right? In schools, as kids come out of school, they have the right skills. That is obviously not always a luxury that you have. Oftentimes you have to reskill. We've had early success with skills assessments, particularly in the hiring process, where you don't necessarily look at the resume to see what school someone went to or what is listed, but you directly try to assess what skills they have in order to
what they know how to
ensure
do,
good match.
yeah.
Exactly, what they know how to do. And that, employers use Indeed to do these skills assessments, and we've had some good results with that to try to ensure a better match.
Are there pitfalls that you see now that you think we could be improving by doing something differently?
I think there has to be a willingness, and obviously, screening via resume oftentimes can be a time saver. You have to be committed to be able to do some of these other avenues, and so I think being committed is definitely
Yeah,
important.
we do a lot of auto part manufacturing in my district, so I'm kind of looking at that with a concern that what are we doing to transition as things change?
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Mr. Reynolds, over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. Ms. Parker, real quick, as looking through bios, getting a sense of everybody at the table. But real quick, I mean, what would you say for the members of your network are the biggest issues around just getting the workers you need? I think one of the things that's concerning me is now we're 2 quarters in a decline of productivity in the United States, while at the same time we have a relatively low U6 unemployment rate. So something's not adding up here. Like from your perspective, what's happening on the ground with so many companies being able to address the workers that they need to find, while we're looking at economic metrics that are telling us that unemployment's quite low?
Thank you, Congressman. What our small business owners are telling us, and I'll just give you an example of a small business owner in South Florida, owns a restaurant, talking about the minimum wage and the effort to increase it to $15 an hour. She owns a restaurant, so obviously lower paid individuals. But what she said to me was, it doesn't really matter about a $15 an hour wage. I'm already offering that. I could offer $20 an hour. I still can't get the dishwasher to show up to work. I still can't find the people to do the job. So I don't need a government mandate to tell me how much to pay them. I need to find the people to fill the job. And even so, that $15 an hour is worth so much less now because of the inflation. They're not able to keep up with buying groceries and their basic needs anyway because it's worth less money. So those are the difficulties in getting people to come to work. But during the pandemic, there was so much excess spending through, there were people who were literally making more money to stay home than to come to work. And because of that, it's kind of hurt the work ethic. And so there are people literally right now, they either advertise bonuses to come and apply for a job, and a friend of mine who owns a restaurant, only 2 people even showed up for the bonus. And then they didn't show up for the first day of work. So it continues to kind of escalate. So some of the excess benefits paid out definitely hurt America's worker ethic, is what I hear a lot of feedback on. Thank you.
There's only 330 votes yet to be cast. We got a little bit of time, so let me throw a question out there. And again, at some point, we'll just disappear for 20 minutes. But so one of the things I want to unpack a little bit, Portia, you sort of acknowledged this. You have very high margin businesses who may have the cash flow, who may have the room to do things that very low margin businesses in really competitive areas, smaller, maybe manufacturing, lower end manufacturing. So I want to maybe just throw this out there, but I'm just what I'm obsessed with is the things that are good to do for workers that also are good business practices and could actually help those entities that have very narrow margins and very competitive. I mean, for example, JP Morgan Chase is not actually a great example of a low margin business, but I would love to know whether, I didn't know this, Dane, that 10% of their hires were people who had been convicted of something. I would love to know whether that is more expensive or less expensive than their traditional hiring practices. So let me just throw that out there. What are the ideas that could get implemented by much lower margin businesses to their benefit? That would be beneficial. Again, that would be beneficial. The mission of this committee is about the economic well-being of the American people. That would be helpful in that regard.
I think one of them is, the skills, the talent shortage is very real, and it's even more real for small and medium-sized businesses because they can't pay what a larger business can pay, so they often feel that they can't get the folks they need. I think the alternate pathways to getting into jobs and looking at the skill, not the school, as people are hiring, makes a huge difference. And a lot of smaller businesses are already doing that, but this is where I think government policy, local workforce boards can be really helpful because a small business doesn't have a dedicated HR person. Their person is also the person who's running everything and doing the books. But by providing opportunities to sort of learn and earn on the job, they can find talent and access more talent. And in Seattle, for example, we have a tech industry association where they can participate in an apprenticeship program, get good talent on the ground, have someone help them with their needs, but they don't have to set up the program themselves. Because I think that's what's really difficult. They can't set up, we can set up our own apprenticeship, our own veterans program. But smaller and medium-sized businesses need to be able to come either to industry groups or to ones with government and other nonprofit intermediaries to find that talent. And I think, that's a practice that's working for us, but I think it's a necessity, honestly, for a lot of smaller businesses.
We're going to hold a roundtable next week, actually, on the subject of apprenticeship. So that's great that you brought it up. But yeah, Holly.
Thank you, Congressman. I have two really great examples of companies that have done this and kind of lower margin, smaller companies. The first example is one that you mentioned in your opening remarks, which is Greyston Bakery, which has piloted a super innovative program called Open Hiring, designed to provide a pathway to a thriving career for people with employment barriers, like formerly incarcerated individuals. They have piloted that in their own bakery, but they have also created programs to take that practice out and scale it to larger companies. And a great example of that is The Body Shop. A huge global beauty brand, 30 million customers, 10,000 employees in their regular employment, and then 12,000 in their franchise model. They piloted this program in their distribution center in North Carolina, and it was incredibly successful. Their monthly turnover dropped 60%. And that's a huge amount of savings, both in terms of recruiting and saving on absenteeism and things like that. So there are a lot of ways that small businesses who practice these incredibly innovative programs can actually scale those and really educate larger companies. The other example is Cascade Engineering in Grand Rapids, Michigan. They have an innovative welfare to work campaign that has greatly reduced their turnover rates from 30% to 96%. So there are really innovative practices that small businesses in lower margin areas are actually pursuing that are incredibly effective.
I'd also add that, and given the competitive labor market that we're in right now, any sort of, and this goes beyond the normal benefits, any sort of non-traditional benefits that you can offer to attract workers, like remote work or flexibility on the job, opens it up for a lot more candidates. Particularly women during the pandemic had a lot of constraints with what types of jobs they could do given childcare commitments at home. And so if you're able to offer some sort of hybrid arrangement or remote work, that does open up the pool of workers that are available to you. Same with if you're willing to partake in fair chance hiring as well. So trying to access more pools and then increasing benefits. And our data does show that a lot of small businesses and businesses that oftentimes are predominantly in-person versus remote have increased the benefits that they're offering. So 401k type payments, retirement payments in general, healthcare, dental, those types of things. So we have seen a distinct increase in those types of benefits.
Thank you. Right before I hand it over to Mr. Stile, Mr. Lynn, when I come back, I'm going to keep sort of trying to isolate these ideas that really help businesses. And in the service of avoiding government mandates, the question obviously then becomes, what is the Business Roundtable and entities like the Chamber doing to publicize these kinds of best practices that would do what this committee is hoping to do, but would also really help a lot of business. So I just wanted to give you a chance to think about that, because when we come back, we'll talk about that. But let me before we break up, let me give the last couple of minutes to Mr. Stahl.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I want to come back to you, Ms. Parker, if I can. We're at a challenging point in time here. We're watching the Federal Reserve will come out here probably momentarily with what their interest rate hike is. There's a discussion, we're going to have a soft landing, which we're all hopeful for. There could be a hard landing. Right now we see overall low unemployment rates. That could shift dramatically if we find ourselves in a hard landing scenario. And so I'm thinking through, how do we grow ourselves out of the box that we put ourselves in through reckless spending in Washington? And the path to that is really through growth. There's a handful of things we have to do, and I think you've highlighted some, right? Reducing the regulatory burden, that's easier said than done, but needs to be worked on. But I do think there's a couple things that we can do that are actually reasonably straightforward policies in Washington. I'd like you to comment on them. The job cuts, the tax cuts that we saw come through under the previous administration that resulted in significant economic growth, saw rising real wages, not only real rising wages, but we also saw it through all the key demographic groups that this committee spends a lot of time on. We saw real rising wages for blacks, for Asians, for Hispanics, for women, for veterans. How important is it from a job standpoint, for job growth, for this Congress to extend and make permanent those tax reforms?
Well, thank you, Ranking Member, for highlighting that. As you know, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act will expire after 2025. Nobody has to do anything. It will just go away. But one of the game changers, and I call it a game changer because that is what Guy Berkebile of Guy Chemical called it, is the immediate expensing that really didn't get a lot of attention publicity-wise. Mostly it was tax cuts and who was getting it. But the real game changer in that tax bill was the immediate expensing for small businesses and allowing them to buy, $1 million piece of machinery, expense it in the first year, and that creates, 10, 20 jobs, could be 30 jobs or more. And so the cascading effect, the trickle-down effect there was huge for small businesses. So extending the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act for small businesses is going to be imperative because, as I mentioned in my remarks, there are 30 million small business owners in this country. They drove this economy prior to the pandemic. Because of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, they can drive us out of this recession.
I agree with you. I think that the tax reforms we saw, it's essential that we keep those in place, meaning Congress has to act to extend those so we have the economic growth that's needed. Let me ask one more question, because I think of all the policies that we could be doing here in Washington today to help workers, I think that's one. I think there's another, is unleashing American energy. Energy costs, in particular in manufacturing industry, it's an industry that I worked in for about a decade, is critical to jobs in southeast Wisconsin, my district, but also across the country. What the impact of rising energy prices is having, not only on the businesses, but ultimately on the business's ability to hire.
Absolutely. The rising cost in energy has had a disproportionate negative effect on our small businesses. We do a monthly poll, SBIQ poll on small businesses across the country. Scott Rasmussen and John McLaughlin do the poll for us. And we asked our small businesses if they have had to raise their prices because of the cost of energy. And a majority of them responded that they have had to not only increase their prices, but increase them a lot and significantly and a lot.
And if I can ask you one final piece, so we've talked about how we're addressing inflation, that we can do pro-growth policies through tax cuts. We can do it through unleashing domestic energy. One thing that you spend time on in particular is making sure that we're connecting the government resources to work. I think there's a real dignity in work. I think sometimes that's lost under the current labor policies that we see and some of the current benefit policies we see. How essential is that to get workers off the sidelines and into the labor force?
Well, look, I mean, I think it's it's a great way to help people get back to work. You cannot overstate the dignity of work, of course, but since we do have such an incredible tight labor market, to add in that requirement would obviously help the smallest of the small businesses to find labor for these jobs. For people who want to come off the sidelines but can't because they will lose those particular benefits. So there's got to be a way to find that in between how we help them get back to work while not losing all their benefits at the same time.
Thank you. I could go all day, Mr. Chairman, but I know we may be off to vote, so I'll yield back to you. And if we want to do another round, I'll keep going, but I'll yield back before I do, so I don't overstay my welcome.
I remain 7 votes set to go. So wrestling the conversation back to the subject.
Thank you, Congressman. I mean, I would say everyone should be a B Corp, but maybe that's just me. I think that companies become B Corps for lots of different reasons. A lot of them see, it is important for attraction and retention of talent. As we all know, millennials, Generation Z are looking for purposeful work environments. And this is one way to really signal that you are a different kind of company, that you are committed to your mission and your purpose to those potential employees. So I'd say that, companies who are really thinking about attracting talent, this can be a good way to do that. I think that it's also a great way to attract different types of investors. Investors who are looking for companies that have a purpose beyond just profit. And I think companies that are interested in connecting with like-minded leaders and learning about innovative business practices from colleagues and peers are the types of companies who really join the B Corp community. They're innovative, they're leaders in social and environmental performance, and they're really looking to collaborate and convene with other business leaders as well.
Let me seed a thought, because I do think we probably need to go vote momentarily. Maybe you can give the Reader's Digest version of the answer, then we can unpack it a little bit more. But has there been work done to show whether B Corps, from a standpoint of return on investment, under or outperform, or other metrics in which they may outperform employee retention, for example? Is there good work out there? And if so, is there anything you can quickly summarize for us on the topic?
We only have one very concrete study that shows essentially a link between B Corp certification and financial performance. There aren't enough kind of publicly traded B Corps. While there are vastly more than there were 2 years ago. We've had a huge influx into the public markets. There still aren't enough to have really great data there, but there is emerging field of study that's pointing to it being beneficial for the bottom line.
I do have some interesting data from our sister company, Glassdoor, which collects a lot of reviews on companies, which we found is essential for a lot of job seekers, with 50% of job seekers out there stating that they will not work for a company with a bad reputation, and that benefits beyond pay are really important to job seekers. And 92% of respondents actually said in a survey that they would be willing to switch jobs to work for a company with an excellent reputation, and so that feeds into that.
That's great, thank you. So I do think we need to take a 20-minute break now. Hopefully it's just going to be 20 minutes, but when we come back, there may be other members, but I'm going to stay on this obsession I have with trying to identify activities that businesses are undertaking that are doing well by doing good. And then I really do want to have the conversation about if the industries settle on a list, what's the best way to propagate that best practice through associations, organizations. With that, why don't we take hopefully a 20-minute break. I'm sorry about this. We have no ability to predict votes, but we do need to do that, and we'll hopefully be back in 20 minutes.
Okay.
I'm your neighbor.
Well, actually, I'm here in DC.
Oh,
so-
are you?
Welcome back, everybody. I'm sorry, really sorry that we that we introduced this 40-minute break into the middle of our conversation. Since we are an informal roundtable, I figure we'll get started, and members will probably wander in and out. But and I need to be off in about half an hour or so. So before I get to questions, we've been talking for 45 minutes before we took that long break. I do want to follow up on the question of isolating these examples of private sector activity that we might want to uphold and how we best uphold that outside of a government context. But let me throw it back to you guys. You've been now thinking for an additional 45 minutes. What other things would you want the committee to be mindful of? We're in the process now of writing our report, and we do want to hold up some things that are sort of bulletproof with respect to private sector initiatives that are making a difference. So let me instead of asking you a question, let me sort of give you guys a little time to highlight whatever. Maybe we'll go reverse order that we've been going, Dane, if you're okay with that. And let me just again give it to you to highlight things that you want the committee to be mindful of.
Yeah, I think there are a couple things, Congressman, and I always think it's best to illustrate by example. And I've given you a couple already, but I want to give another one before I broaden out a little bit. And IBM and I think Humana are two very good examples where those companies have built learning portals. And essentially what that learning portal does, it gives me, the employee, an opportunity to identify what are the skills I have, what are the skills I need to take advantage of the job I'm wanting to pursue. And beyond identifying what that skill gap is, what those skills gaps are, the individual then has an opportunity to tap into a learning portal for the company. They don't have to go back to the community college, which will cost them, after work, find childcare, figure out in some cases transportation, but the individual can actually learn on his or her own time. More than that, the individual,
Through internally offered courses, resources, that sort of thing?
that is correct. And so what that does is not just allows the individual to acquire new skills, but they're actually valued by the employer. And so what we've seen using IBM as an example is that 50% of their workers don't have a bachelor's degree. It's skills-based. And the portal is one of those tools they use to help actually not just get into the company, but those are the tools, more importantly, that are used by employees who are in the company. It's opportunity for upward mobility. So that's one example, but it's a very similar example for Humana. More broadly at BRT, what we're trying
I
to
wonder,
do.
before you get to that,
Yes.
I wonder if we might get, committee staff or something in front of a computer or a terminal where they could actually take a look at this. You think IBM or Humana would be willing to let us take a look?
I think more broadly, I can't speak for IBM, but what I can say is that we would be interested in trying to find opportunities to expose members to what the private sector is doing.
Yeah.
I mean, you've heard from Porsche at Microsoft and what they're doing. But we have a lot of different examples, whether it's the work through our Multiple Pathways initiative or the work that Aon and Accenture are doing around apprenticeships. There are a lot of ways that individual companies are opening doors for individuals, many of whom are first generation, coming into work in corporate America. But there is just as many opportunities to make sure that the people who have worked for that company for 15 years and need reskilled in order to stay employed or find new opportunities, there are plenty of examples in that vein as well. But if I could, let me go to the question you asked before the intermission, and that is around the small and medium-sized businesses who don't have the capacity to do some of the work that I've described in big companies. What we're doing through our Multiple Pathways initiative and other initiatives are encouraging our members to actually partner with those small and medium-sized businesses. How do we marry the work of suppliers or even companies that are not suppliers to help them take advantage of some of the work that our big companies are doing and can share with those small companies? But there's also a BRT component, a business roundtable component, and what we're doing to actually put the word out and provide tools and resources to small and medium-sized businesses. Let me give you an example. We've talked a little bit about opening pathways to individuals with criminal records. Many small businesses don't know where to begin. I mean, it's fundamental. What can I do to actually open doors for individuals with criminal records? We produced an on-ramps guide with your top 100 actions you can take and examples of who's doing some of this work. We've created a national map of what are the nonprofits in your communities that are doing some of this work that you as small businesses could actually partner with. And we're going to grow that over time. And the last example I would give you is a number of resources we're going to release in the next couple of weeks around skills-based hiring and advancement. One of those is around internal mobility. How do we create more opportunity for individuals within the company? We're creating practical tools, playbooks. Those are not going to be shared with just BRT members. We're making those widely available on our website. Those will be resources that will work with organizations like the Jobs Network and others around the country so that they can disseminate those as well. Those are, again, practical tools to help those companies that may not have the capacity, but also help our own members at the same time.
Great, thank you.
You bet.
Thank you. Holly, anything to add?
Just to kind of riff on that a little bit, we really believe that you can't manage what you don't measure. And I think there's a really good example of how understanding your impact can actually lead to improved performance and impact on stakeholders, which is Danone North America. Giant, 6,000 person company, one of the top 15 food and beverage companies in the United States. When they first went through the certification process, they were asked a question about how many of your employees are paid a living wage. They actually had to start collecting additional data about their employee wages to start understanding that question. And through that process, they actually found out that for a certain segment of their employees, they were paid below the local living wage. And so through that process of measuring their impact, they were able to recognize a problem and quickly move to rectify it. And now all employees at Danone North America are paid a living wage. So I just want to emphasize, you can't really manage what you don't measure.
How do they define a living wage?
There are various ways that you can do that. On the B Impact assessment, there's a data set through MIT that's available for any company to go and look at their wage and see what the local living wage is.
It varies by region.
Yes, completely.
Yeah.
And then there's also a nonprofit called Living Wage US, which has a living wage certification as well.
Yeah. I ask because one of the committee's recommendations will likely be a minimum wage, a federal minimum wage, but there are really interesting arguments that actually achieve some support. My Republican friends sort of don't like it, but the concept of a minimum wage, but there are ideas on the left around regional minimum wage. There's also opposition to a regional, but anyway, it's a really interesting, we may follow up with you on that because it's an interesting idea.
I'd be happy to follow
Yeah.
up on that.
Sorry, I interrupted you, I think.
No, I was just going to say, and then in terms of kind of bringing practices to other companies, I think that there are lots of examples of this. The Grayston Bakery example I talked about earlier, they've actually created their own nonprofit that's entirely dedicated to getting the word out about open hiring. So that's a small business that is really trying to scale an innovative and super impactful practice much more broadly across the economy. And then the other example that speaks to the supply chain, 7th Generation, has done a lot of work with their own supply chain, encouraging them and supporting them to go through our B Impact assessment to understand their impact on their stakeholders and encourage them to take action to improve their practices.
Super intriguing what Grayson does with his first come, first serve a staffing model. That might be something, if it is both, you hear that they do that and it reduces turnover, their downsides. If we could fully understand that might be something that we sort of hold up in this report as an example. It's not going to be applicable necessarily to everybody. I don't know if it works at Microsoft, but it's super intriguing if in fact, it is net positive to the company.
Well, it sounds like there's quite a lot of agreement with the members of this roundtable about second chance hiring. Whether you call it second chance hiring or open hiring, it seems like it's also something that the BRT does. So it seems like there's a lot of agreement about this being a really impactful, beneficial practice.
Yeah, no, we'll make a note of that. It has been a recurring theme today. Yeah, thank you. Dr. Goodell, give you this microphone. You have the floor.
This helps turning on the microphone. I like this theme of data because we at Indeed believe data enables better decision making, and I think that shows up in better hiring practices for employers as well. And so if you can have the data, collect the data, and then base decision on that data, I think is really good. And one of the things that we haven't talked about a whole lot yet is salary transparency, which goes back a little bit to this data concept as well. So having salary transparency as a tool is really important. Anything to provide greater insight into what you're getting yourself into is really good. Where you want to have a good match between employer and employee. So that's, I think, a powerful tool for employers to have in their toolbox. Education and training, we've talked a little bit about, and that goes towards internal mobility as well, as people have the ability to move around. Diversity, I think, is a huge factor that attracts a lot of talent as well. We talked a little bit about assessments and flexibility as a benefit. We're still finding a lot of data that in support of job seekers wanting more remote able jobs or hybrid jobs. And we're still seeing a lot of job postings that have that offer some sort of remote capability in there. So much higher levels than what we've seen pre-pandemic. So I think that speaks to that. And then any other types of benefits that you can offer that would attract talent, that would attract job seekers and enable them to take that job. So I don't know if that's maternity leave benefits, health care, dental care, retirement care. Any of these things will support certain job seekers, depending on who they are, in being able to find a good job. And I think that has been the really nice message so far of this roundtable, that I think we're all in favor of having people find a great job, and that's really important to them. And that is also great for employers, because then if you have an employee that finds a job that they really like, you keep that employee, and you don't have the cost of turnover involved in that then.
You know, DEI rapidly falls into the maw of the culture wars around here and elsewhere. And I should know the answer to this question. I'm going to put the staff on it. But are you aware of studies which quantifiably demonstrate what we say, which is that companies will do better if they're drawing from a much broader pool of applicants? Is there good work out there that quantifies that?
Yeah, there are some studies, and we're happy to work with your staff to identify some interesting research that has identified that. And at Indeed, we also have a wellness index that we formally called a happiness index that also looks at this, that diversity and general work happiness is really important, and employees really value that, because they don't want to just come to work and earn money. That's great. I think we all enjoy that. But they want to come to work and bring their whole selves to work and have it be a good experience. And I think that feeds into that. So yeah, happy to provide some studies on that.
Yeah, thank you. This is also a recurring theme in this roundtable, transparency, both in hiring and in salary and that sort of thing. And you may be uniquely suited to help us highlight that in the report.
Delighted.
We're joined by Sarah Jacobs of San Diego, California. She is a critical part of this committee, though the most junior member of the majority side of things. Sarah, what we're doing right now, I just wanted, because we'd asked a lot of questions and it had been very formal, I just asked everybody to I just wanted to give everybody the floor for 3 minutes. So what I'll do is I'll just ask Portia to contribute, and then not only do you get your questions asked, but probably at 5 after 3, you will now be chairing the roundtable, because I've got it 3 o'clock.
Promotion.
Yeah, which will simply involve asking whatever questions you have, soliciting any feedback, and then just shut down the roundtable whenever other members have. So thank you for that. Yeah. Portia.
So I think, in addition, what small and medium size businesses can do, and also what they need. We've talked a lot about workforce and talent. We also believe, coming from the tech company side, that digital transformation is absolutely critical. And that is where, I know the focus isn't on how can government do it, but we have seen some innovative partnerships with private sector, where either from the workforce side or Department of Commerce side, you support businesses to make that leap. And during the pandemic, you were sort of forced into it. And for example, we had a partnership in El Paso. We were supporting local initiatives where essentially you were going to small businesses and saying, okay, what do you need? You're an in-person business, you're a pizza parlor, whatever, but now you need to move online. You need to do it right away. Here, let's help you with what equipment do you need, and then let's train your staff. Like, we'll sort of come to you because you can't stop running your business and go take a couple days off, or find the community college course that starts in 3 months to help you do this. And so see what software you got, train everyone on your staff on that. And that can be a win-win, because it's helping the business to grow and find more opportunities. It's also giving those workers tools to be able to succeed in those jobs, but also to get additional skills that can benefit them, sort of as they move along in their careers. So I think thinking about how to really get in there and help smaller concerns to do that. And that's an ongoing process. I mean, I think we've been talking about skilling. Part of this is a lifelong learning process, because the technology changes every couple of years. And so, smaller and medium-sized businesses really need help with that.
I often think of the word digital fluency, because it's not just the high-tech jobs. It's all jobs. I mean, given the example that you just talked about, Portia, I mean, we need to be able to equip regardless of what the job is, individuals with some level of digital fluency, even if it's foundational data analytics skills. You look at some of the certificates from Google in cybersecurity and data analytics. Having gone through one of those certificates myself, it's fairly rudimentary, but it's foundational being able to take the next step, and that's what leads to your ability to be competitive as an individual or to take advantage of some of those jobs in this economy.
And we've also been seeing, we call this the technification of jobs as well. In job postings themselves, we see a lot more demand for technical data analytics type skills for non-tech jobs as well.
Great, thank you. Well, we've now succeeded in what I hope these things are, which is you guys talk more than we do. So that's the whole point of the roundtable. But very grateful, so I'll hand both the microphone and the gavel to Ms. Jacobs. I'm told that we're not expecting other members, so you've got the floor for as long as you want. I'm going to sneak out in a couple of minutes, and so thank you. And let me thank you, because I won't interrupt Sarah, but thank you so much for all your input. I think we're going to follow up on a lot of these ideas.
Thank you for my promotion on this committee. And thanks to our panelists. And sorry I missed the earlier part. Was in a couple of briefings. I couldn't leave. But I wanted to get to the issue of childcare. I know you talked a little bit about it in an important thing that would help with diversity and inclusion. I represent San Diego, one of the most expensive places to live in the country. I think we just beat LA and San Francisco. Not how I wanted to beat LA and San Francisco, but at least we beat them, I guess. But, you know, for my constituents, the cost of childcare is a huge issue. Childcare deserts, even before the pandemic, 60% of families couldn't find childcare that met their needs. So I was wondering, Ms. Wu, if you can explain how access to care, including childcare, supports both the businesses and the workers. Yeah.
Sure, and I suspect some of my other co-panelists also have some great information on this. You know, at Microsoft, we have thought about this a lot, and a lot of it is thinking about equity and participation in the workplace, because we recognize lack of childcare disproportionately impacts women. I think we all saw that firsthand in the pandemic. Microsoft, you know, we sort of see it in a continuum. It's childcare, it's also paid leave, it's flexibility at work. During the pandemic, actually, Microsoft was fortunate to be able to be in a position to provide additional types of caregiver leave, because we saw, you know, that's what we heard from our employees. They were saying, I can't make this work right now, so something's got to give. And we want to retain great talent. So I do think it's, you know, it's fundamental. Sometimes people think of these as like soft issues and hard issues, but I think for a company where, you know, our lifeblood is our talent, we need to have childcare supports and child-friendly policies in place. I think the question is sort of how do other businesses that might not be able to provide as generous benefits directly as we are able to do and require our supplier network to do, you know, how they tackle it. That's, I think, a different question.
Yeah. That actually gets to my second question, and then maybe if anyone wants to add in, but, you know, there is an employer-provided child care tax credit, but we don't see a lot of companies taking it up. So why do you think more companies aren't using this benefit? Or like what more could we be doing on our end to help smaller companies provide some of these benefits? Maybe Mr. Lin.
If I may just round out the response to the first question. I think completely agree with Portia's comments on how employers see childcare as part of maybe not what traditionally we call the wraparound services for employees. But I think what we've learned through the pandemic is not just did we see a large percentage of women leaving the workforce, but their ability to return was reduced in large part because of the number of childcare providers that closed down, closed their doors during the pandemic. One thing that I begun to see among some of our members and heard CEOs talk about is some consideration for provision of on-campus, on-site childcare services. And granted, they're not going to be able to provide on-site childcare to all of their employees, but I think it's the provision of on-site coupled with what are the ways in which they can make it more affordable? What are the financial incentives they could offer? One of the examples I would give you is down in the Triangle region of North Carolina. SAS, a tech company in Cary, right outside of Raleigh, and they have 2 child care centers on site and also provide the financial assistance. In North Carolina, those the state rates those child care centers, 1 star being the lowest, 5-star being the highest. We have 2 5-star child care centers at SAS that has done a tremendous amount in their ability to bring individuals back to the workforce, being able to retain workers because of that benefit. And their children are right on campus. Would encourage you to, and would love to make an introduction, as they're very proud. The CEO, Jim Goodnight, is very proud of that service. I am not the expert to talk about why there's a high take-up rate or not in our companies, but we'll be happy to get back to you on that point.
Thank you. Anyone else want to add on childcare? Yeah.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Patagonia is a great example of this. They have a on-site childcare both at their corporate headquarters, but also in their distribution center in Nevada. They started it in the 1980s. It is subsidized, so it's not entirely free for employees, but it has room for, I think, roughly 100 children. And I have seen some statistics about the cost for them. And what I've seen is that, roughly half is made up for in terms of, reducing absenteeism and lowered cost. But then the tax credits do make up about a 30% more of the cost. So, it pays for itself for the vast majority of the cost.
That's very good to know.
We also have some interesting data showing that when asking women why they haven't re-entered the workforce, they often state that they don't have the flexibility to also watch their kids or have no daycare options because, unfortunately, women are overrepresented in child care facilities in terms of being workers there. And so it's like a double whammy. You're out of a job, you don't have daycare for your kid, and rates are shooting up. And so that is a complicated picture. On top of that, we saw COVID had distinct impacts on women in that a lot of part-time jobs were lost. Women are also overrepresented on part-time jobs, and in the types of fields that women are very actively working in. So education services, healthcare services were more impacted in the early days of the pandemic than, say, manufacturing, for example, where it's heavily concentrated on men, or warehousing. And so this recession and pandemic took a much harder hit on women than it did on men, which is actually new. Usually recessions hit men harder than it does women. And we're seeing that when you dig into the numbers, women are having a harder time re-entering the workforce. We're still missing around 1 million women at this point because of child care issues. And there are other reasons as well, but that's a very, very highly named reason.
Okay, that's all very helpful. I wanted to pivot a little bit and ask you, Ms. Wu, about artificial intelligence. So I know Microsoft's investing in a large language model. We know these large language models can have the potential to impact inequality and workforce and all of these other issues. So, and not just in the ways we think. I think a lot of people think of automation in like the manufacturing, but, they're also going to impact jobs in research and writing and customer service and art and photography and a whole range of industries. So how are you thinking about the potential of these technologies on workforce and inequality, and what responsibility do tech companies have to consider the impacts of this technology on workforce and inequality, and how does that factor into your overall strategy?
Thank you, Congresswoman. Well, these natural language models, that's of course part of the broader development and progress of artificial intelligence, which is how can some of these machine learning models help, speed, for example, customer service processing or interaction, answering questions that people have. I think it's absolutely critical and central that we think about the impacts on workforce. And actually at Microsoft, we have an office of responsible artificial intelligence, right? So we're always thinking about these issues. We have principles for the development of our AI and how we market it and how it's developed. And we have to think about these things, including the impact on workers. I think the wonderful thing about AI is it has the potential to really unlock all kinds of realms of productivity and effectiveness and impact. And, talking about for small and medium-sized businesses, if they have some of these tools, that can really help them as a business do things that they may not be able to hire a larger staff to do. But we absolutely do need to think about the impact on individuals. I think we're seeing, I think a lot of people thought, okay, for example, self-driving cars will be here tomorrow, and then all the truck drivers will disappear in the world. Whereas we actually need a ton of truck drivers right now still. So it's more of an evolution, and thinking about how there are more and more technology-enabled jobs. And the way we think about it is every industry is a tech industry now. And whether you're in food service, healthcare, teaching, you are going to need those technology skills. You're going to need to use these tools. So some of the things we've been talking about earlier about how do we make sure that people have these lifelong learning opportunities to keep adding those skills no matter what field they're in, that's absolutely something we think about and we think all companies should think about. And frankly, government should think about. We need to plan ahead and look ahead to make sure workers are prepared for the jobs of tomorrow. So.
Thank you. All right. Well, I just want to thank you all so much for participating in this roundtable. And I guess it's not a real hearing, so I don't have to do anything formal to close it. So this roundtable's over. Thank you.
Thank you.